My name's Dana Dolliff. I'm the president of the class of 1963. Welcome, everybody. A few housekeeping announcements, one of which is this call will be recorded and will be available somewhere. We don't know where yet. Everybody's on mute, and I'm actually on my phone because my computer wouldn't work, so hopefully you can all hear me. If you have questions during the call, use the chat function and send your questions to Aisha Veer. She's at the Alumni Association. And maybe at the end, if we have time, we'll turn mute off. But for now, we're all going to be muted. So we have a few guests today I want to mention. Pat Cummings from the foundation. My wife is listening in, Sally. Paul Maevsky from the Climate Change Institute. Matt Mullen from the alumni, from the foundation. Jim Satelli from SPIA, which you will find out what that means, S-P-I-A. Ashley Twombly, who is our staff person at the Alumni Association that's helped set all these things up. John Diamond is here, and Aisha, who you've already heard from. So very quickly, how do we get here and what are we going to do? The class of 63 planned a mini reunion for last year, and when that fell apart, the reunion committee decided to keep meeting. And we had a few speakers, we did Zoom calls, it was kind of fun. And we started talking about trying to involve more alumni. And we've been thinking about that. And then I went virtually to the University of Maine Foundation annual meeting. And at that meeting, it was announced that Dan and Betty Churchill were giving roughly $6.5 million in their will to the University of Maine for some specific purposes. And there was a little video clip of Dan talking about what they did and how much fun it was. And I said to myself, aha, that's who we want. So I talked to Dan, and he was willing to do it. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But first, John Diamond has been looking for an occasion to do something, and we're going to give him that occasion right now. So, John, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Dana. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I know some of you know this, but I always have to say it when I'm with the class of 1963. My father, Nat Diamond, was a member of the class of 63. He was a non-traditional student. He didn't come to the university until he was 39 years old and had 4 kids and then went to the university. So he was a very proud alum, proud of being a member of the class of 63. And somewhere in all of our things at our home, we have a stein that says class of 63 on it. I wish I had thought to bring it today. But that's not why we're here. I wanted to fill you in on something that's very special. The Alumni Association's bylaws permit our board of directors to grant honorary alumnus or alumna status to an individual who didn't attend the University of Maine, but whose loyalty, work, and enthusiasm for the university merits special recognition. And it's not something that the board does lightly or does often. I think the last time an honorary alumna or alumnus status was bestowed was in 2018. A person has to work pretty hard to earn honorary alumna or alumnus status, and probably has to work harder than many of us did when we were students at the university. Well, someone very close to the class of 1963 has been selected for this award, and it's Betty Churchill. The decision was made based on the totality of Betty's efforts on behalf of UMaine. I know that many people became more aware of Betty and Dan's philanthropy last fall when the announcement that Dana just made reference to was announced. But people are less familiar with what Betty has done to promote the academic and intellectual richness of the university. Some of you may know that there's a very strong relationship between UMaine and Dickinson College in Pennsylvania. That's Betty's alma mater. There's a reason for that relationship. Betty. Several years ago, Betty and Dan heard from a UMaine faculty member that a proposal was in the works for a national public service academy. Betty was well connected with the president of Dickinson College and took it upon herself to inform him about what was being discussed here in Maine. That led to a collaborative program between UMaine and Dickinson, first as a collaboration on conferences to promote education and careers in public service. And within a short time, it became a formal agreement between the two schools that brought Dickinson and UMaine students together. SPIA, that's UMaine's School of Policy and International Affairs, has welcomed Dickinson students through this program. So has the Climate Change Institute that Paul Majewski will be talking about. And students from other colleges and universities have come to UMaine as well because of this relationship between Dickinson and UMaine. And many of them have stayed involved with the university, including serving on SPIA's advisory board and serving as active members of the SPIA Alumni Network. So today, SPIA and the Climate Change Institute are two of UMaine's most reputable and recognizable programs, and rightly so. Without question, though, Betty's initiative and deep involvement have helped make that reputation possible. So it's little wonder that the Alumni Association would choose to recognize Betty as an honorary alumna. We're in the business of helping promote UMaine's quality, reputation, and value to others, and it's clear to us that Betty's in that same business. So Betty, on behalf of the Board of Directors and our 100,000 members, we are proud to welcome you as a member of the Black Bear alumni family. I believe you've received the honorary membership certificate that we sent last week. I just want you to know that those styrofoam peanuts that it was packed in are biodegradable. Seriously, they dissolve in water. I didn't want you to think that we were in some way contributing to the environmental problems that the Climate Change Institute is working hard to solve. So again, congratulations, Betty. We're proud of it and grateful for everything you've done.
Thank you very much.
And Betty certainly has been thrilled by this. And as you can see, on your behalf, John, I'm handing her the certificate. So bestowing it on.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wonderful honor. So, yeah, we've turned the certificate around. Now Betty's studying it. But yeah.
Okay.
John, thank you so much.
Yes.
You're most welcome, both of you.
I'm very honored.
Thank you, John. Congratulations, Betty. It's always fun to start off with some really good news. A few things I forgot to mention before. The chat function is how you send questions to Nation, and you can also chat with each other. And just be careful to. I just saw Pat send a chat to everybody, so be sure if you want to send a note to your old girlfriend, you don't hit the all button. I also would point out that I did manage to find my old University of Maine blazer, which I thought was appropriate for the situation. And I wanted to make a comment about what we're trying to do today. This kind of the idea is to make this one-third education, one-third entertainment, and one-third a discussion about philanthropy and the benefits for those who are participating in it. So with that in mind, Dan and I are going to have a chat, and I'm going to ask Dan a bunch of questions, which he has promised to answer. He's not under oath, so, I think we'll be okay. So off we go. Dan, let's go back to like 1959 and talk about how did you end up at the University of Maine, particularly in engineering physics, and what are some of your fond memories of the University of Maine from back in the olden days?
Dana, first, as they seem to say on all the talk shows, thank you for having me. But no thanks for embarrassing me by writing things like starring Dan Churchill. A little over the top, but anyway, I hope it's this is not a disappointment. But okay, so again, both Betty and I are absolutely delighted that that the university and the Alumni Association have bestowed this honor on her. And I, as a husband, I got to say, I think it was well deserved. So I was originally from Massachusetts, but we had a place in Maine from the time that I was pretty small, and felt a strong tie to Maine. We always loved Maine, and another reason for coming there was that I was interested in engineering, and Maine is really an excellent engineering school as well as in other areas. So I mentioned we loved the state and actually had some other long-standing ties. In fact, one of the people on this Zoom session, Fred Stoddard, is someone that I think I've known longer than anyone else that I'm in touch with other than my own family. And Fred and I, we would gather, our families would gather for the Lobster Festival in Rockland when we were about 7 years old. So it's a long-standing tie with Maine and with that particular fraternity brother. And as for why engineering physics, well, you know, I guess like everyone else, you kind of pick what sounds good and what you think fits with your interests and your skills, and at that point in your life, you don't have a very good idea of exactly where it's going to take you. So also, what do I think or remember about UMaine? Well, for one thing, I got to say I wasn't known for very much. I hope to be pretty low profile in Maine. Les Masterman and I prided ourselves on stealing the moose head from Segep when we were pledges, which was Les's idea and my aching back, because that was a pretty heavy moose head mounted on a thick plank of oak. But other than that, and recalling professors at the engineering in the physics faculty who said things when you were thinking about going home for the weekend, said things like, "You must eat physics, sleep physics, and breathe physics if you want to be a physicist," which indicated that I probably wasn't going to be a physicist. Anyway, back to you, Dana.
Okay, so after UMaine, you started an unusual career. How were you recruited? Why did you join the CIA? And what can you tell us about life in the CIA?
Okay, right. The CIA was recruiting on campus in our senior year, and they were recruiting for analyst positions. That is, those that would not be undercover. But I interviewed. I thought it sounded pretty exciting. And I lobbied with them to take me into the clandestine service, or what they called operations. And thankfully they agreed. So, which was a bit tricky because a number of people already knew I was interviewing there, and that meant I was going undercover. In any event, that's how it started. And when I went to Washington, actually there was one other University of Maine person, Dana Morton, who went along, and I spent about a week living in the home he had with his wife and their young child. And I wanted to mention Dana because I was checking and I was informed that Dana actually passed away 4 years ago today. So perhaps it's an appropriate time to remember Dana. Just a couple comments about CIA. And as I think we all know, it's not a bunch of James Bonds trying to set the world to rights with as much mayhem as possible. And it's not what the conspiracy theorists say or think. In fact, it can carry out no operations within the US. And it is really a collection of some remarkable people who are very dedicated to the country and above all, to their mission in connection with the collection and analysis of information, which is to tell troops to power. So I'm a big fan of the CIA. Why did you ask why I went there? Well, it was the Cold War, and I think a lot of us wanted to serve in some way. My two closest friends at the University of Maine at that time, Fred Stoddard and Brian Estes, both went into the Navy and served in Vietnam, which I did not. But that was part of it, and adventure and travel were another part of it. So nothing terribly complicated. But so what can I tell you about it? First of all, one of the great things about the CIA was that that's where I met Betty, who'd already been there a few years. But I was with the CIA for 5 years and the Air Force doing the same kind of work for another 3 years. So it was a total of 8 years of service. And much of the time at the CIA was actually taken up with training. Well, first of all, anyone who has ever served with the CIA is under a lifetime obligation to clear anything they want to say, certainly in any forum like this, with the clearance board at the CIA, which I did, which means that even though it was 52 years ago that Betty and I both left the CIA, and there's probably very little we could tell you that is not in the public domain, still have to get it cleared. And they left my talk largely intact, except for redacting out a few of the fun bits. But since I didn't stay there very long, I'll talk just briefly about the training. I spent a fair amount of time at what they call the farm, which was the then classified facility for training the young CIA officers. And they were training most of us to be case officers. Case officers run agents. They are not spies. The agents are the real spies, and they're the ones who are really taking the risks. But so there was a good deal of training in tradecraft, that is the practice of clandestine intelligence, surveillance, recruitment, managing agents, and then because the Vietnam War was on, and the CIA has a serious role during wartime to support the military through paramilitary activities, we all went through paramilitary training. And again, they redacted out the things I was going to tell you about the training, apart from jumping out of a few aircraft, doing a little bit of jungle training, and pretty much the kind of training you would imagine people would engage in if they were going to be running groups of Hmong tribesmen in the jungles of Laos or Vietnam. That's what some of my colleagues went to do. I also want to mention that, well, I did mention Betty. I met Betty there, and Betty at that point had already served in Berlin. That was from 1963 to 65. So she was there just 2 years after the Berlin Wall went up. So that was the heart of the Cold War. And what Betty did in Berlin was to run some support agents, which meant these were people who would support the actual agents behind the Iron Curtain by receiving messages, often by mail, encrypted messages coming out from behind the Iron Curtain, and they would then, through Betty, pass them on back to the agency. I was to have gone to Vietnam, and I was trained for that. Unfortunately, I had a spinal injury and had to have spinal surgery, which was in those days not minimally invasive, and the CIA said I couldn't go to a war zone for another 2 years. The net result of that was that I transferred to the U.S. Air Force, which had an intelligence unit doing the same sort of thing working in Europe. So we then spent 3 years in Frankfurt, and I got to do the sorts of things that I had been that I've been trained to do at the agency. And Betty worked for the same group there. That's really about all I can tell you about that. But I did want to show you one thing. This book, I would recommend this book. It's called The Craft We Chose, My Life in the CIA by Richard Holm. Richard Holm went through agency training, all the same training that we went through at about the same time. Betty knew him, I did not, but we knew a whole lot of people in common. And he went to Thailand. He was involved in running Hmong teams that interdicted the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos. After he left Thailand, he went to Africa, served in the Congo. His aircraft went down in flames on one occasion, and he was badly burnt, saved by some tribesmen and a witch doctor in the jungle. For a while, he lost sight in both eyes. He was so badly burnt, eventually regained sight in one eye, and went on to a very significant career at the agency, ending as a station chief in Paris, which is one of the more senior overseas positions. So if you want to hear any more about CIA life, that's a good place to, that's a really good book. Okay. Dana.
So Dan, how about, you spent a lot more time in Europe. What kept you there, and what were some of the significant events?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, the reason we first got there was going there with the Air Force and in an intelligence capacity. But Betty and I would never have gone back to Europe, I think, had it not been for those initial experiences. The combination of an engineering physics training, spend a chance to learn French and German, French at the CIA, German while living there, and a chance to actually work closely with Europeans for 3 years, and then an MBA, were basically opened the door to international finance. So I went to work for Exxon after I returned to the States. And after some time in the States, they then sent us to Brussels. So we spent 5 years working with Exxon in Brussels, returned to the States thinking we would never be working in Europe again. And once again, I was recruited for a job in London. And there we stayed 15 years. And again, that came about simply because we had had this experience with international finance in Europe at that point. So that's why we ended up going back so much. I just say one more thing about the time in the UK. That was the go-go 80s. That was the period when companies were taking each other over at a great rate. And in the first 5 years I was there, I had 5 employers without changing my job. So we were continuously being taken over. In fact, 1 month after I got there, my boss in New York called me up and said, "Churchill, don't make any commitments. We're all going to be fired." And he was mostly right. He was, and most of the others were. I was kind of lucky, and I stayed lucky. So through 5 takeovers, I ended up, in the end, I was actually the last of the Norton Simon management team that was still left in the corporation. And after that, I switched to Avis Europe, which had been one of our companies, and in a finance function as the VP Finance. So that then kept us there for a total of 15 years, and which really was the full career.
So, so as I understand it, you decided it was time to come back to the States, and without going into too much detail, how about explaining how you got from a public service sector finances to accumulating the resources to support the commitment that you've made to the University of Maine, which is this $6.5 million bequest that we've been talking about. How did you get there?
I guess the short answer is kind of got lucky and got in the right place at the right time. But I would also say, you know, I'm well aware that many others have done as well or much better. So it's certainly not unique by any means. But for what it's worth, there were two main elements to it. When I was with Exxon, we went to Seattle, where I was working for Exxon Nuclear. And while we were out there, Betty and I became aware that the Seattle real estate market was looking pretty attractive. So we were only there for 2.5 years, but we were going from there to Brussels. So before we left, we bought some, in addition to our own home, a couple other homes, and a parcel of 20 acres on a plateau east of Seattle, kind of in the line of, in the direction of development. And we did it all on 100% debt. In other words, we didn't have enough money to really put any equity into it, but we kept those assets for 5 to 10 years, depending upon which one it was, and the market did very well for us. In fact, for the 20 acres, I only wish we'd bought it about 2 miles north of the one we did get, because it would have been on what then became the Microsoft campus. But that was stage one, and stage two was in our time in London toward the end. It was the job was very challenging, and I had a company that went public and private and public again, and all of that turmoil created real opportunities for us. So that's the truth.
Okay, so now let's get to the really interesting part, which is, how did you get interested in philanthropy, and how did you and Betty choose where to apply that interest?
Okay, first I got to give a lot of credit to Betty. Betty, as you mentioned, went to Dickinson College, and like many liberal arts colleges, they've got a pretty good give back ethos. And so Betty was enthusiastic about doing something for Dickinson. And we got involved in trying to help Dickinson and funding some programs there. And frankly, saw how much fun it was and how rewarding it was at Dickinson. So I called up, I think it was Brad Coffey in the development office at the time, and said, hey, you know, we think we'd like to do something for the University of Maine. Could you set up some interviews? And came up to Maine and had interviews at that point with Paul Majewski, because I'd expressed an interest in things that related to the environment and climate change, amongst others. And because I'd expressed an interest in public service and international affairs, they set up meetings with John Mann and Mohammed Bakhtiari, who were in the process of trying to create SPIA, the School of Policy and International Affairs. It was little more than a gleam in their eye at that time, but it was a chance to get involved in something we really cared about, and to do it at a formative stage. So yeah, that's the background.
So how did you get interested in the University of Maine and the particular areas that you picked out? First, how did you get to Maine? And then next would be Climate Change Institute.
Well, why Maine? Was my alma mater. I saw what Betty did with her alma mater, and I thought that would be a really good thing to do for the University of Maine, and that's why Maine. But as for so let's start with the Climate Change Institute. I was always, well, we've always been interested in environmental issues and climate change. And so they set up a meeting with Paul Majewski. And in that initial meeting, we talked about what the Climate Change Institute was doing. And I asked Paul, if you could choose, what do you think would be the most effective way or most effective thing we could do for CCI and its students? And Paul said, fund expeditions. But actually first, let me just say, I'll let Paul speak about the Climate Change Institute. It's a wonderful institute, highly multidisciplinary, and so much of the really best work is going on an interdisciplinary basis, where you have people from various disciplines working closely together. So I think very highly of the institute, and I would just say it is a true world-class institute. It's done a lot of remarkable things. I mean, Paul led the largest ice coring expedition ever to Greenland, involving something like 15 universities, led the largest ice coring expedition to Antarctica, and just recently he led the biggest scientific expedition ever to Mount Everest. So, CCI is at the forefront of science in this area. So, okay, and as to why do we do what we did, the Exploration Fund. We were very surprised at how effectively they could use funds. And we just to give you a sense, after a couple of years, we were giving $15,000 a year to fund student expeditions. And with that amount of money, on average, there are 7 student expeditions per year to places like the Yukon, Greenland, the Andes, the Himalayas, Falkland Islands, Antarctica. They can extract an amazing amount out of a relatively small amount of money, for a number of reasons, but one of them is students sleeping in tents on glaciers don't get to spend a lot of money. So, but for that and for other reasons, they really use the money very effectively. And the second really good thing about it is that in many cases, it serves as seed money. These students they really need to carry out significant research. And for that, you want to get significant grants. Grants from the outfits like the National Science Foundation and others are available when you can produce a grant application that shows a high probability that you're going to achieve something meaningful, that you will do valuable research. And often that means there has to be at least one trip to the target area beforehand. So this has often paid for the first of the trips. It serves as seed money. And many of the students go on to raising far more money after that. So actually, I wonder if Paul Majewski would like to say a little bit about that.
I'd love to, Dan. Dan and Betty, thank you. Well, what a great delight to be here and to see you recognized. And you're such wonderful friends of the Institute. We've been friends for a long time. We've known each other since 2004. We managed to cruise around the Antarctic together, along with Pat. You've gone on an expedition with one of our teams to Peru. You've been an unbelievable advocate for the Institute. You've been a thought-provoking advisor and a contributor in so many ways. So let me just describe the Institute quickly, because there would appear to be a little bit of a discrepancy about the amount of money that could support students in the field as you described. We're a very old institute. We're the oldest research institute in the university. We are interdisciplinary, physical, chemical, biological, and social aspects of climate change. We have 135 members. We support 60 graduate students. We interact with many academic units on campus. We're in effect the glue that holds climate together. We're also very competitive in terms of our grant getting. And because we have to provide equipment, we have to technical salaries, support the graduate student salaries, tuition, etc. For every one of those projects that we're successful in, and we are very successful, there's a task involved, and that task was designated by the principal investigator who's a faculty member. and that's what, for many of the graduate students, forms the basis of their research. However, not every single one of the faculty in our institute, nor every one of the disciplines is necessarily, money is not that easy to find for them in some cases. Not every single thing that we do can actually be supported by the federal government. And then even more importantly, we are really dedicated to getting our students into the field, and even more dedicated to having them learn how to be self-sufficient. And to be self-sufficient in our field means you have to know how to write a proposal, which you have to do for the Dan and Betty Exploration Fund. You have to have a budget. You have to determine how much it'll cost. You have to do it on a relatively small amount of money. The total is $15,000. And you have to prove that it's a safe thing to do. You have to bring somebody else with you to be safe. And in some cases, this is the only way that students can actually get funding to not only complete their dissertations, because the field of climate that they might be in is not one that is easy to fund, but in some cases, there's absolutely no money available. So the Churchill Exploration Fund, since 2004, has resulted in 97 projects. This is $15,000 a year, 72 students. And the reason that there are more projects than students is because some of those students, it was the only way they could get done what they needed to do. And as Dan mentioned, they've been throughout Maine, worldwide, and it has been a tremendous opportunity for our students. But in addition to that, Dan and Betty did something else that's also been mentioned, but I need to say it again. I said we look at the physical, chemical, biological, and social aspects of climate, but we've never really delved into policy. We haven't known very much about it. But because of the Dickinson Association, because of Dan and Betty's interest in SPIA, and SPIA is one of our partners, we've been able to expand our involvement in policy. And why is that important to a climate scientist? We've spent decades discovering how the climate works, how humans have impacted the climate, but none of that will go anywhere unless our students and climate scientists in general understand how to turn this into policy. So we want to thank Dan and Betty for their advocacy, their funding, mentoring of students, which goes on a regular basis, and for pushing us into the field of policy and closer to SPIA. And with the new funds that are coming in, we have even greater expansion possibilities that I'm sure Jim will talk about. So with heartfelt thanks.
All right, Dan, ready for the next question?
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds like CCI was already a center of excellence, but SPIA was relatively new when you got involved. What was the attraction of SPIA, and a little bit about what they do?
So Betty and I, after all of our time overseas, we're very interested in international affairs. And with our time in intelligence and just a general predisposition, I think we also care a great deal about public service as well as international affairs. And SPIA seemed to be a way where we could address both of those things. And I mean, one of the reasons for focusing on public service is that, it's very easy for a student to come out of college with quite a lot of debt. And if you're considering a public service career, you're not you may do reasonably well. You're never going to get wealthy. And very often the best students are driven to go into investment banking, or work toward a law degree, or work towards something that they think will, or that will make them, give them much higher remuneration. If you're really interested in public service, you're going to be making a sacrifice. If you want the best to go in there, we can at least make it a little bit easier for them to come out of college without a lot of debt. So that's, I guess, those two things are the reasons that we really cared about SPIA. And SPIA was actually just a kind of a gleam in the eye when we first got involved in 2007. There were a couple of conferences, as John mentioned, a number of conferences actually, before they had their first students. Jim can say more about the numbers of students, but the students between the alumni and those who are currently in the program, I think the total number of students who've been through the program now or are in it, probably around 110 or 120, and I'll ask Jim to give you the number. But it's a small program. It started off with a target of 10 students per year in a 2-year program. That'd be 20 students on campus at any given point. And the idea in keeping it small was to really keep the quality high and have a great deal of faculty-student interaction. It took a few years to get there, but since then, Jim's been struggling to keep the numbers down because we've got more and more really good students applying to the program. And so at the present time, we've been ranging 35 to 40 students at any given point. I think it might be 38. Jim can update that. And we have managed, or Jim and his team have managed to accommodate that many without, I think, any real reduction in quality. It's about 1/3 international, 1/3 state of Maine, and 1/3 of students from other parts in the country. So it's a very diverse student body, and they're really very good students. I just wanted to comment a bit on what we're doing with the funds there, because like the Climate Change Institute, the funds are used very, very effectively. I'll give you an example of one fund. There's a thing called the Graduate Fellowship Fund. And that fund pays students $4,500 a year toward their tuition. If the student who receives this is not a state of Maine resident, he then qualifies, by virtue of winning one of these fellowships, he then qualifies for in-state tuition. So $4,500 is roughly half of the annual tuition for an in-state student. So instead of paying over $20,000, he is then paying $4,500. So the benefit to the student is something like 5 times the amount that the donor actually gives. It's one of the, thanks to the University of Maine's cooperation and willingness, it makes it a very, very effective way of supporting students. And furthermore, many of the students who get these, after they get to the campus, they manage to land an assistantship. If they do that, which pays them more, they then have to turn back the fellowship so that we can use it for another student. So in many cases, we get to roll these things over more than once. Long short of it is that I think we're very impressed with the way with the University of Maine's help, the way these funds can be put to very effective use. Impact's great. And I thought Jim Settley he's the director of SPIA, might like to say something.
Dan, you know I'd love to say something, but I will try to be quick. But it's hard, and you know I get off when I get going and talking about SPIA, which has become our love and joy. It's hard to stop. So give me the hook, and I'll probably look at John to do that here in about 2 minutes. But I will try to make it. First of all, congrats to Betty for joining the illustrious class of '63. Quite an honor, and so very fortunate to see that happen and be a witness that today. We've said thank you to Dan and Betty so many times, can't say it enough. And I would tell people that without Dan and Betty, SPIA wouldn't be here today, and SPIA alumni wouldn't be making an impact around the world. SPIA students wouldn't be making an impact on campus and through their internships and about ready to go out there. Dan, your numbers were pretty close. We've, as long as CCI has been on the campus at University of Maine, SPIA wasn't even close to being there when any of you were there as students, or if you were there after there as students. So we've only been around with students for about 11 years. We'll have our 10-year anniversary in 2022 of graduating our first cohort of 5 students. So we've graduated 9 cohorts of students so far, 84 total students around the world. I heard from a student the other day, I know Dan loves the story, a young man named Hamdan Borji, who never would have gone to the University of Maine, wouldn't have gone to SPIA if not for Dan and Betty. He works at the World Food Program, the recent Nobel Peace Prize winner in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He is the senior relations manager for the African Union in 6 sub-Saharan African countries. He's the guy making sure that food is getting to those countries. He's a SPIA graduate. He wrote us a note, said he never would have been there if it wasn't for SPIA. Hence, he never would have been there if it wasn't for Dan and Betty. We also have students working for the FBI, for the Women's Gender Equality Network, promoting gender equity around the globe, for Facebook, who were, for Senator Collins and Representative Golden from Maine. We have students that work in the climate industry, EESI, Anna McGinn, who was a Dickinson grad, one of those wonderful students that we brought in with an NSF foundation grant. A brilliant student, one of our best. She's down there and she's managing the climate portfolio and is constantly on the Hill. Where we just have, the impact is incredible, and it wouldn't have been there for Dan and Betty. One of the things that Dan and I talk about frequently, because Dan has not only been on the SPIA board for the 10 years, he has run the SPIA board, and it's been more than 10, Dan, because I've only been on with SPIA probably since 2009, so 11 years, and I think you started with him in 2007 when it was a Gleam and a Speakers Bureau, right? So Dan's been a part of this piece that has come along over the years, seen us go from no students to producing high quality students. So I apologize. I'm at home because I have to take that. Hang on just a second. Dan, go.
Dana, why don't you pick up the thread here?
Well,
let's see.
I'm back.
Jim, I think you're going to be cut off pretty soon.
I'll be quick. So here's what I wanted to say, just to wrap up. I'm sorry, my wife's been waiting on that for weeks, and she made me stay home today and do this. Dan, you talked about the fellowship fund, and the fellowship fund that Dan just described this morning, Dan, you don't even know this, but we had a Fulbright application. So we're going to take a Fulbright student from Venezuela. And so if you're a Maine kid and you want to understand what's going on in Venezuela, where there's 93% poverty and 5 million people have left that country through the last 2 regimes, including the current regime of Mendoza down there, we're gonna learn about that from a Venezuelan student who will sit in SPIA. We were talking about how to do these fellowships this morning, and we offered 2 this morning. One is to a fellow named Papa Ahern from Ghana, who has 2 master's degrees in economics already, one in Germany, one in this country of Ghana, and wants to come to SPIA. We're offering one to a student that already has a doctorate from South Africa, and we're going to work with the grad school to do the same thing that we do with the fellowship, to bring a young man from Principia College who is German with a 3.88. These students are all around 3.7, 3.8s, 3.9s. And we just talked with the grad school today. We're going to probably accept 2 more, and then we're going to have to cut off applications. So we've gone from 5 students 10 years ago to cutting off applications for students from around the world, producing amazing people. That's because of Dan and Betty, both of you, and you get to see this. So thank you very, very much. What an incredible, team we have become. We continue to be, and how incredible lucky we are to have you as part of our program. Thank you.
Jim, you embarrass me. Dana, over to you.
Okay, this is going to be my last question, and then we'll see if there are questions from the rest of the group. And the last one is, now that you have finalized your state commitment to the University of Maine, will you continue to be involved directly at UMaine?
The answer is absolutely. And that's actually rather selfish, because what we're doing is the most fun and I think we've had in a long time. And it's just working with the University of Maine and seeing and getting to know students and seeing the impact is really very rewarding. And actually, on that, I would just like to see if I can do this. This is low tech, but I want to show you something which kind of illustrates the reason that we do some of this. And Dana, if I got this aimed properly, I'm trying to aim it at one picture of some of the first students that came through. They graduated in 2012 from SPIA. And the one on the left is now an exec at Facebook. The one on the right's an FBI special agent. Here we have two students. One did a dual master's at SPIA and the Climate Change Institute. The other a master's at the Climate Change Institute. The fellow is now at.
Dan, we're losing your volume.
How is that?
That's better.
Okay, I must have covered up the mic. The fellow is now in a doctoral degree program at the University of Ottawa, and the girl who was mentioned earlier by Jim, Anna McGinn, is working in Washington, where in an outfit that's in support of the environmental and energy work of Congress. And both of them came with National Science Foundation graduate fellowships, which meant they really could have gone anywhere, but chose the University of Maine. And they actually, at that time, they were two of only 4 grad students at the University of Maine that had NSF fellowships. Down here, we have 2 brother-sister twins, actually, where the reason we have a baby picture, we've gotten to know the family. Over here, we have 2 of the Climate Change Institute students, now both graduated and with doctoral degrees. The fellow on the left in earth sciences and actually glaciology, works on moraines dating. The other fellow is an anthropologist and archaeologist. And they're standing on top of Coropuna, which is a 21,079-foot mountain in the Andes. They got there, they're actually doing the research in the Andes at the time. And up at the top, a painting by Lynn Majewski of mountains on the Antarctic Peninsula. So I think that kind of illustrates why we are involved and what it is that it makes us so rewarding.
Okay, and I would point out that the 2 fellows at the top of the mountain were holding a sign, and that sign says, "Thank you, Dan and Betty."
But, you know,
I got a big kick out of that.
You know, all of those represent friendships that we've developed that have grown out of these relationships, and that's really rewarding.
Okay, any other comments before we open it up to questions, Dan?
Okay, I'll make it quick, Dana. We wanted to get involved long before this would become a bequest, because that's really where the fun is. That's really rewarding, and it makes us happy. It also allows one to get involved and find out what it is you care about and what is most beneficial for the university before you put something in a bequest. Furthermore, I think the amount doesn't have to be large. The university is going to be delighted to have you involved and to get you involved, whatever you're doing. And then you can later, if you wish, endow it through a bequest. But long and the short of it, it's fun, it's rewarding, and it's probably selfish because it gives so much back to us. I guess that's that's about all I can say, Dana.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see if we can take some questions now. Ashley?
Yes, just a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question for Dan or Betty or anybody, any of our guests on the call, you can use the chat function here on Zoom and send your questions to Aisha Veer, and we will make sure that we ask your question. We do have a couple. Dan, did you read Bob Woodward's book about the CIA? And if so, what did you think of it?
So, short answer, and I think, Betty, you did. I don't think either of us has read the Bob Woodward book on the CIA, no.
All right.
I really can't comment, I'm afraid, sorry.
No problem. What would be, do you have any advice for anyone who might be thinking about a planned gift, but they don't know how to go about it?
I call the foundation, I guess. I mean, I guess that's the kind of what we did. Is we said, you know, let's call them up, tell them what we're interested in, tell them, you know, and ask them perhaps to not just give guidance, but to open up some avenues to explore it. So if you're interested in environmental affairs and climate change, there's the Climate Change Institute. If it's the honors college that turns you on, but to request that they put you in touch with someone in those areas who can then discuss with you how the funds could be used and what would be most efficient.
Definitely. All right. If you had a magic wand, what change or improvement would you recommend for the University of Maine?
Huh. Convince the state to be more generous, I guess, would be, you know, the Maine operates on a really tight budget, and I think they do very well with it, and they have cut in many areas, and you know, trying to protect the most important programs, but having to cut at other times, and you know, I think it's a pretty damn good university. I just wish we could find ways to not only get more donor support, but to get more support from the state. That may not be in the cards, but anyway, that's, and well, let me think. Maybe also an increased focus on research in a number of different areas. The return can be high. It can be for the state of Maine as well as for the school.
All right. And someone was interested in Betty's role in the CIA, and they wondered if there was any more you could tell us about her role, or if you mentioned all that you could.
Yeah.
We really can say very little more because actually I had to get it cleared. So we can't really start talking about more detail without getting it cleared in advance. I would just say that Betty's that when agents are operating in a hostile environment like behind the Iron Curtain, getting messages out is one of the trickiest things, and they almost always have to come out in some encrypted or fashion, and so that uses a number of different mechanisms. The mail is certainly one, you know, I guess it's quite obvious that there are a number of different things that are used with mail. There are things that even back 50 years ago, they were using microdots, which gave a photograph message on of an entire document on something the size of a period on the end of a line. So beyond and so Betty's role was basically to help to close that circle, to make sure that the messages got back.
All right. I think those are all the questions that have come in so far. If anybody's working on one right now, like I said, you can type it into the chat function. If you're not sure how to do that, I'm kind of scrolling through the screen here to see if anybody looks like they have one they need to ask out loud. Oh, someone wants to know, do you read spy novels? And do you have a favorite one?
Betty? Actually, I mean, I haven't read a spy novel for a very long time. We used to read the John le Carré books, and but that's ancient history. I would say that in films, I'm trying to remember the name of one that I really liked. There was one that it was about the capture and trading of Rudolph Abel for Francis Gary Powers. It starred Tom. I'm getting old. Sorry,
Thanks.
Tom Hanks. Yeah, and it was a really a film that I thought was pretty accurate. It portrayed what went on in the intelligence community quite accurately. But no, I don't think either of us has read any spy novels in quite a while.
All right. Bridge of Spies. Was that the name of the?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. John Diamond helped us with that one.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
All right. Any other questions? I think that's all that's come in from the chat.
Righty. I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover. I think we're just a little over an hour, so I'd be interested in turning everybody's mute off and see what happens. That may not last very long. We may have to abort and just get the hell out of here. But before we do that, Dan and Betty, thank you so much for your support for the university and taking part in this event today. If people have suggestions or comments about this event or maybe future ones, get them to me or to Ashley. Class of 63, I think is, I think this has been a lot of fun and hopefully interesting to everybody. So thank you.
Well, we have a lot of successful members of our class. I'd love to see some more, and I hope there'll be more fun than this one. But I hope it was worthwhile.
Thanks. So let's turn off mute. And if it's hard for me to see who's here, and of course I've been on the phone the whole time, so I haven't dared touch the computer or the phone for fear of making it worse. Anyway, anybody want to make a comment before we go?
I will, Dana. Jim here. I just want to say thanks to you and your leadership. I think this is a great start for a whole new series of programs. I think Dan and Betty was a great way to start. I second the motion that there are a few other folks in this class that we ought to bring around and grill them a little bit too. This has been very, very good, and I'm really appreciative of your leadership on this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Jim, I hope you'll volunteer.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Well,
So
I'll
how many,
second what Jim said, thanks Dana for putting this together, and thanks Dan for all you've done for the university. I think we all appreciate it.
Thank you.
I too would like to thank you so much. This whole presentation, all four of you, Betty and Dan and Paul and Jim, it was really a wonderful afternoon. Thanks.
Dan, I have a question. I remember taking freshman physics with Squeaky Bennett. Does that ring a bell?
Absolutely. And Squeaky Bennett Hall was home for 4 years. So yeah, I remember very well. Always wondered how he got that name, but when he walked through the corridors in his crepe soled shoes, he did squeak.
I'll put somebody else on the spot right now. Paul, I heard you speak down at Bath to a Naval Architects meeting. I'm going to recommend that you talk about some of the work that your folks have been doing over the last several years to our group. And I apologize for putting you on the spot, but not.
I would love to. Absolutely. Anytime.
He's great.
Would you like an hour and a half right now?
Yes.
Tell you what, give us 15 minutes to go fix a drink and then we'll be back.
Okay, I have to have one too. But anytime, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Ed Mallett here in Vero Beach, Florida. And once again, thank you for the incredibly informative presentation. You've led some amazing lives, that's for sure. I'm curious, Dan and Betty, what was the greatest surprise that came about to you upon entering the CIA or throughout your career in the CIA?
Betty, do you have any thoughts? The greatest surprise. Coming up with a map. I'm not sure which of us is doing that, but I'm sorry. Some of the things there were some things that were surprises and that we couldn't talk about even now unless we've been clear. And others, I don't know. What was it? It is an organization that has an amazing range of talents and skills, and in both its own employees and the agents around the world. I honestly don't know what would be the greatest surprise, but I would say I think it was and remains a very important part of our national security.
Thank you.
Agreed.
May I have a follow-up? I'm sorry. I'm curious, do you still maintain relationships with some of the folks from those years, or?
Yes, yeah, a few. After we came back from overseas, well, Betty and I were members of the CIA retirement organization, and all the old quote spies got together. We let our membership of that lapse a few years ago, but and there was really only there's one fellow that we do stay in regular contact with, and one or two others that we do very occasionally. One I would say one of the things I learned when I met with a lot of the people I'd been through training with, met with them 30 some years after we'd gotten away, we left, that is in right around 2000, year 2000, was how many of them marriages had failed. And that, you know, the people who live a life undercover can have a really hard time maintaining the kind of relationship you want in a marriage, because you know, when you're dating, you basically can't tell anyone where you work, and when you're married, you probably can, but that's about it. And so that's that I think, you know, it's kind of hard when you come home after work and you can never say anything to your wife or your husband about what you've just done that day. So that's one of the reasons that's a problem. But and it's also one of the reasons that so many of us married other people who were at the CIA. At least we could have a little bit more of a conversation.
And you mentioned jump training, airborne training. Can you share where you did that training? Or I went through jump school at Fort Benning in Georgia.
And then the answer is no. They redacted that. But
okay.
It was not at Fort Benning, and it was kind of at well, it's not a facility that was known as airborne. In fact, the jumps we made with them, I also joined their skydiving club at that point.
Oh, interesting.
But the jumps at with the agency were at one of their own facilities, and they're out of a range of different kinds of aircraft.
123s?
I don't know. No. Small and large.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, my name's Clyde Nickerson. I was in engineering physics also. And I always thought the squeaky was based on this high-pitched voice rather than his shoes. But anyway, apropos of the conversation just before, I was a science advisor at the 18th Airborne Corps for a couple of years. It was quite an experience. And I had a long career with the Department of the Army.
Well, perhaps you could be one of the future speakers.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, but thank you for asking.
Okay, I think we're winding down. Thank you, everybody. It's great to have all these bears in the same place. Again, thanks, Dan, Betty, everybody else involved. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.